time of profound weakness for me happened when my wife and I had been married for several years, and we found ourselves going through this extended time of infertility. Several times my wife had become pregnant but would miscarry very, very quickly on. And I was spending my days praying and asking the Lord for the gift of children, seeking the face of the Lord. And one of the things that started happening to me is that I found myself despairing because it didn't seem as though God was answering those prayers, but also because it became very easy for me to sin in that, because I could look at other people who were getting pregnant and having babies, and there was a sense of resentment in my own life where I couldn't rejoice with them. I was thinking, well, God, why not us? Why is this not happening for us? And so I was in a really dangerous place in my life because it seemed as though I was praying for this deep desire of my heart, and God just didn't seem to be answering. And I was too theologically sophisticated, you might say. I would say cunning, to actually express that I was angry with God or bitter toward God. But I think I was definitely growing in that point. And now, when I look back at that time, I see that what God was doing in my life was exactly what a mentor of mine said, who came to our house one night after we'd had, my wife had had a miscarriage, and I was just devastated. I said, it just seems as though we're going to die alone. And I said, I can't think of anything worse than that in my life. And my mentor kind of gently rebuked me and said, I don't know what God is doing in your life, and I don't know why God is allowing you to walk through this particular trial, but I know that God's primary purpose for you is Romans 8:29, to conform you into the image of Christ, that he might be the firstborn among many brothers. And so whatever it is that is happening providentially in your life is for that purpose. And it was the kind of rebuke I needed at the moment. Later, I discovered as God's providence just worked itself out in our lives, we found ourselves in an adoption process where we, even though we didn't know anybody who had adopted, we didn't know anybody in that situation, we ended up on the other side of the planet in a Russian orphanage adopting two little 1-year-old boys. We never would have pursued that if we had not been through that time of weakness and that time of infertility, which means that if we hadn't been through that, we not only wouldn't have our two oldest sons, we also wouldn't have been taught the things that God taught us through that process about what it means to be adopted into the family of God, of what it means to care about vulnerable people who are on the peripheries of our vision. All those things God taught us during that time. And also because when I look at my 5 sons now that God has given to us, I would have been a really terrible parent if children had come along the way I expected. If I had just got married and then a few years later children had been born, I think I would have seen them as just an expected part of my life, and I probably would have just seen them as kind of an extension of myself. And I think God knew that I had to be humbled, and that I had to, what God said to the Israelites in Deuteronomy, he made you to hunger so that you would know that man does not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God. I think God did that in our time of weakness and searching for him in terms of children. And several years later, I was looking, it was my oldest son's birthday, and I went and found an old daily calendar journal that I kept at the time, and I thought, I wonder what I was doing the day that he was born. And I looked at it and realized that morning I was doing what I would have done every morning at that time, walking to a coffee shop down from my apartment, praying and asking God for children, and growing despondent and even bitter without ever having any idea that God was answering my prayer at that very moment in a way that I'd never expected. And when I think about that, it makes me wonder, what are all of the other ways that God's working in my life right now in ways that I never would have scripted and that are better better than what I would have asked or even imagined or thought.